I'm Cole Haddon, and what you're about to listen to is a bonus episode from Season 1 of 5 a.m. Story Talk. In this podcast bonus eps, my guests break down a seminal piece of art from their lives, what I describe as mini masterclasses, although not always on the subject you expect. These bonus episodes are exclusive to my paid supporters in the season they were originally published. But in the following season, they're each unlocked, one at a time, so everyone can listen to them alongside the new episodes. Your paid subscriptions get you early access to these bonus eps, months and months early, but they also help keep the lights on here. In fact, Season 2 of this podcast enjoys several production upgrades because so many of you believe in this multimedia arts and culture conversation. I hope you consider becoming a paid supporter yourself, which you can learn more about in the show notes. Now, enjoy this 5 a.m. Story Talk bonus episode, Story Talkers. I'm Cole Haddon, and welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk. Thank you for being a paid subscriber, my friends. Your support is why my wife hasn't told me to stop shouting from my office that everyone has to be quiet already because I'm recording a podcast up here. I'm back with my friend Mike Jackson, Emmy-winning film and TV producer and founding partner at Get Lifted. We'll be discussing a seminal piece of art from his life, or rather two seminal pieces, photographs of the Jackson 5 and Muhammad Ali, taken by Kwame Brathwaite, and both snapped on the African coast in 1974. You can find links to these photos in the show notes, which I encourage you to check out along with the link to Braithwaite's photos. This is the artist and activist who popularized the term Black is Beautiful during the Civil Rights Movement and its immediate aftermath. I've also dropped a link in there to my favorite Kwame Brathwaite photo, which Mike and I will chat a bit about too. This is an incredibly powerful conversation, I think, at times heavy, at times profound, about the kind of beauty that was largely excluded from white-controlled media until the 21st century. By the time it's done, you'll understand why Mike, an artist so determined to explore and celebrate the breadth of the Black American experience, would pick Braithwaite's work to talk about with me. So let's get into it. When you agreed to join me for this conversation, I asked you to choose a seminal piece of artwork from your life to talk about, and you put a twist on the request. Can you tell listeners what you went with?
Yes, well, I did have two specific pieces of art from this one artist, but in general, I love the artist. His name is Kwame Brathwaite. And then I chose a couple different pieces to kind of highlight. One is a picture of the Jacksons, all six brothers, on a boat right after they left a place called Goree Island. And that really resonated to me. To be honest, I didn't realize initially that the photo was from them leaving there. I thought they were actually leaving a place called Cape Coast, which is in Ghana. And originally what resonated with me, and it still does, despite them being two different locations, is the feeling that you capture when looking at the photo Kwame captured, which was Goree and Cape Coast were both major ports of trade. And the major export was Black people. So it was during slavery. And both of these places are like, upon approach, are just these like beautifully built structures, and they're like little mini islands, so to speak. And upon approach, you're just like, wow, this is absolutely breathtaking. But as you get off the boat and you get on the island and you start to kind of walk the grounds and learn the history, you quickly realize that people who look like you were traded there. And it becomes a really somber experience pretty quickly. And what I loved about that photograph was the look of just, dismay, just like, what did we just experience? And it just, not only is my name Michael Jackson, but that feeling of just like, holy shit. You could see it on their faces just like I felt like it was on mine. So that was one of the pieces I chose for that reason, because it just resonated in a really personal way. And the other piece I chose was it was a photograph of Muhammad Ali. It was the evening before he fought Foreman in 1974, the Rumble in the Jungle. And even in the movie, there was a scene right before the night before the fight where everyone was doubting him, and Jada Pinkett played his wife, and she's yelling at him. And, this is the greatest. This is Muhammad Ali. And what I loved about that photo was, after this fight and this argument with his wife and all the naysayers thinking he was going to lose because Foreman was undefeated and he was like the dude at that point, Ali had scheduled a photo shoot with a bunch of different photographers to kind of follow him around. He was so downtrodden at that moment. He walked out because they're all waiting for him. He's like, photo shoot's done. No, everyone just leave me alone. Kwame, follow him there at a distance. And Kwame ended up capturing this image, which you'll see of him sitting on like a bench, and he's just in his thoughts. He's just very pensive, and he's in street clothes and boots, and it's like, Muhammad Ali, legend has it from my mother, and I choose to believe this story, that he met me when I was a little baby, and he stole me out of my mom's stole. He took me out of my mother's arms and kissed me. And was like, what a beautiful baby, and like hand in the back. So I've heard that story my whole life, so I've always had an affinity for Ali. And I've always held him on a pedestal, which he deserves to be. But I think, sometimes our heroes, we forget that they're human as well. And in that moment, that photograph that Kwame captured showed a real human moment for him, where he built his legacy and his career as the greatest, and he earned that right to be perceived in that way. But despite all of it, everyone thought he was going to lose this fight to Foreman. And you just see this real sense of humanity. And obviously, he went on and won the fight. He introduced the rope-a-dope in that fight, and and won by knockout, I think, in the 8th or 9th round. But in that moment, even the greatest had doubt, and he had to kind of go inward to find what he needed to find to get ready the next day to go fight that fight. So those are the two images that I chose. And then Brathwaite in general is just like, he's the guy who, whether it was street photography throughout the streets of Harlem or Africa, he was always that guy who captured those moments. He also was like a photographer for different publications. So he got to travel around and just capture all these moments in Black history. And he even coined the phrase Black is beautiful, which, he had a Black modeling agency, and a part of like the DNA of this agency and the promotion of Black women essentially was Black is beautiful. And he and his brother kind of introduced that phrase, and it's obviously still relevant today. It's something that we always say, Black is beautiful. So Kwame, to me, again, I picked two images, but he's a man of many life moments, and he's captured so much rich moments in Black history that I chose him.
When did you discover his work?
Oh,
Was it in your childhood or as an adult?
As an adult, like basically his son, Kwame Brathwaite Jr., discovered all of his dad's images, like in a bunch of binders. And then he cataloged everything, and then he started gallery exhibits. So I didn't really know much about him until probably, I guess, around, 2018, maybe around there, I'm guessing. And Jesse Williams, the actor Jesse Williams, was the one who was kind of like, he kind of turned me on him a little bit, and he invited me, or he told me about this gallery opening, this Philip Martin Gallery in Los Angeles. And I just kind of went down there, met his son, and bought those two pieces then. And just have kind of like tracked him and tracked his images and tracked the other shows. And I'm going to obviously buy more at certain points. But yeah, it was just a wonderful discovery later in life. And, you realize just how many people from the culture have been impactful that don't get their light. Like another example of someone who probably deserves a documentary. Probably deserves a little more light shown on him than he's even received thus far. But at least at this point, if I'm not doing the doc, at least I can support him as a patron to the others.
I think one of the things I find striking about his depiction of Black faces in the 60s, early 70s is that a lot of white models at the time would have been juxtaposed with some sort of bright neon, like everything was bright and very vivid colors, where Kwame's art, his photographs, the colors behind and on the Black people were warmer. They were olives. They were more that 70s vibe, even a little bit before the 70s, which really complements the Black skin tone. It was something only a Black photographer could do.
There's one image, I think it's Nina Simone, who's dark skinned, and it's like this reddish, dark red background with like this yellow. Essentially, it felt like sunset, but the blending of her natural skin tone with this dark red and then this like circular obviously representing the sunset, like just the color combination. And pop feels like what you would say when you're describing what you were talking about. So I don't know if I want to say pops off the canvas or not, but it's just the blending of these colors are just like perfect. And it seems like his composition around what he was shooting, it did feel a little like muted, but like still colorful and worldly. And even like if he was shooting like just people in the streets of Harlem doing certain things, it was like you felt life popping out of it, no matter what. And that was what was beautiful to me about his art.
Looking at the two photos that you chose, I was struck by the fact that they're both from the African coast, same region of Africa, with the Atlantic, very contemplative.
Same year. Both,
Pardon
I
me?
believe, were in 74 also.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah.
Did you notice that similarity between them, that sort of staring out at the Atlantic? And
Yes, I mean, I noticed the sentiment. I think that spoke a lot to where my head was at the time, quite frankly. I was, you know, again, before I was married, before I had kids, and I found myself in a lot of moments of deep thought and you know, looking back on my life and wondering if the choices I made that led me to this point in my life, how are they going to inform me moving forward? And I even think like, because soon after that is when I decided to lean in to the idea of love and all of those things. And I think as I was contemplating my life and the type of life I wanted to have in the second half of it, or maybe the last third of it, I had to kind of go through a lot of soul searching and, you know, proving certain people wrong about certain projections they had on my life. Not like bad things, but just like, you're going to be single forever. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. It's like, am I? You know, and I think again, those images and that moment in time spoke to me. So I never actually thought about the fact that they were similar before, although clearly they are. It's in total 7 people, Ali and the Jacksons, in deep thought. You know, there's no way that you can't come out of that thought process with some sort of critique of your own journey.
when you were describing the Jacksons photo, it sounded as if you've been to Goree Island.
Well, I wasn't at Goree Island, but I was at Cape Coast. So it was
Okay.
similar. Cape Coast is Ghana. I think Goree is, I don't know where Goree is.
Senegal, off the
Okay.
coast
Yeah,
of
so-
Dakar.
You know, and just, I think as a Black American, just going to Africa, you know, in itself is an experience and a reflective moment in your life because you think about the history and the what ifs. But then to kind of be immersed in like the actual environment of slaves, like where the actual slave trade was happening, where you can only imagine like the tears and the fear and the realization of like, as these people get on this boat, like, holy fuck, like they're leaving everything they know. I think all of like the heaviness of that, it hits you. And if you're a Black American, like you go back in your family tree, odds are you're going to be able to trace it back to Africa. So there's also that part of me that was like, God, I wonder what my lineage went through. And, you know, it's just a really heavy thing to kind of think about and live with. And then you think about the privilege you have being in the United States. And, you know, we're not talking about that long ago. So there's real heaviness that comes with it. But there's also a lot of joy in general that comes from Kwame's art, you know. And I think that's what's great about him, is the body of his work kind of embodies the totality of the Black experience, especially in like the 60s and 70s, well into the 80s and 90s. So, yeah, he's a very important piece of history, Black history. And yeah, I'm glad we get to talk about him a little bit.
One of the things you referenced in the earlier part of our conversation was aspirational. You used the word aspirational. I said that is its own form of resistance. And you just referenced joy as well, which I can only speak from my white perspective, but I know that these photos would have been incredibly antagonistic to my white family because of what you just described, the holistic, the wholeness of the experience. Joy itself is, for some people, an affront, you know, for some Americans, Black joy specifically. And I think that's what strikes me so much about Brathwaite's photos, is it feels antagonistic to the white eye, and it feels proprietary. It's not for me. And there's something really appealing, at least to me, about that. But how does it feel for you seeing those photos? Because there weren't 500 Black photographers doing this in the 60s and
I
70s.
just think it's really about him showing like the Black experience, and his photographs embody what that Black experience was. I think a byproduct of those photos, like pride,
Mm.
honor. And, I think that was what his intention was, more so than being antagonistic towards anyone else. I think, and I don't know, but my belief is that he was doing like, like Fubu for us, by us, I think he was doing that
Mm.
for his culture more so than, poking someone else. I think especially I can only imagine what it was like being Black in the 60s and the 50s and even the early 70s. It's like, it was like now, which is still a grind and a struggle, but then when we were literally fighting for civil rights for the first time in like that era of like Blackness, I feel like his voice was necessary. His images are necessary to help cultivate pride and inform the journey. And he also had the lens of Africa, which a lot of people that look like me didn't have at that point in time. So he was also able to juxtapose these images from Harlem and Africa. And, essentially like we're all alike, man. Like we're all wearing this skin, and we're all just trying to like find happiness and joy and find legacy that we can create, which is rooted around family, which is still the same for most people, I believe, of all races, which I wish we could kind of hold on to a little more now. But yeah, I think ultimately for him it was just about instilling joy and pride.
That was probably poorly worded. I wasn't meaning to imply he was being intentionally antagonistic, but simply how it was experienced on, I suspect, on the other side. Unlike a Gordon Parks, I think Gordon Parks spoke to all of America, where I'm not confident Braithwaite's photos would have spoken to all of America.
Well, I would like to think that they would, but America was a different place, even for Gordon Parks at certain points versus, I mean, they're kind of our contemporaries, but Gordon Parks was more, I don't know. I don't want to compare the two and draw conclusions about either. I just know, and Braithwaite's who I've kind of embodied more and immersed myself in with more, although Gordon Parks is incredible. But again, I just think he was doing it for him and his culture. Whether it was his Black modeling agency, everything he's done was about uplifting and empowering people of color, Black folk. And I think as far as white people feeling, whether the intention, whatever that was, how it makes white folks feel. I mean, DEI right now is, making white folks uncomfortable. Black history in America, like book bannings and removing books from book lists in this country, it makes white people uncomfortable. I mean, I think anything we do is going to make them uncomfortable. So
That is a fair point.
I don't think that's ever going to change. I mean, they literally just erase Black history from the education system. Like they're telling us to remove books, And I've actually had some white folks say, well, that's because it makes them uncomfortable. And I was like, that's a daggone shame that they feel uncomfortable. I'm like, I've been uncomfortable since the day I was born, walking around in my Blackness in this country. But I figured I would embrace it and make it my superpower. If being uncomfortable in your own skin means you should eliminate history, then I don't know. I don't have words for that, but it's what's happening. So
It's a grim point in history, this idea that they think they can rewrite history so conveniently and forget the country's past. But I also don't understand where they think it's going to go. The country isn't going to lose its
make America
population.
great again, right? Like that's what they want us to go back, right? Like doesn't that make it great again, right? I'm not even like as political as I used to be. I'm at this point I'm like I'm in the season of learning. I'm in the season of conversation. I'm in the season of accountability. As a registered Democrat and someone who considered himself a liberal, I don't know what liberal means anymore. So I know that Trump won by a lot. Not a lot, but he won. And so all of it for me now is just like What can we do to be better? What's that process? And it obviously starts with communication, but everyone has to be willing to have the conversations. So that's where I'm at with it.
How do we be better in the context of some of the work that we discussed that you were doing, that you're doing in the first part of our conversation? How do we deal with the fact that there is a large percentage of people, of the audience, that have trouble hearing, have trouble being communicated with? How do you avoid just speaking to the choir when creating documentaries and art in 2025? How do you reach these people that seem so disconnected from any type of reality and even humanity that we understand?
I don't have the full answer to that question. I think for us, again, I think it's about your conviction for your art, your conviction for your storytelling, and your commitment to your truth. You know, your conviction, you like the context in which you see or want to present things. Again, I don't want to make stuff just for people that are already on my side. That's I don't have conversations like that either. I want to meet people in the middle, but my art and the art that we create doesn't fully have to be aligned with how I navigate my personal life, right? Like when we're doing projects, I just want to do stuff that speaks to us, and I feel like my project is going to speak to an audience, and I don't know who always that audience is going to be, but it typically is probably more liberal, left-leaning people. But how I live my life is differently now. Like I live my life in the middle more. Like I live my life where I can have conversations with someone on either side of a topic, and I listen and I try to digest, and then I assess for myself how I feel about that conversation. And sometimes that conversation makes me look at something differently than I did going into it. Sometimes it affirms what I've already thought. And I guess ultimately, although that's not our intention specifically when we're producing something, especially the docs, but I do feel like going back to the Get Lifted thing and creating dialogue, I do think that we do want our content to create that conversation. So in that regard, it's the same thing because the end result's the same, right? Like for me personally, and for the projects that we produce is create dialogue, create conversation. And I think that's the one thing we're missing right now because everyone's speaking inside their own bubble and rallying the troops when no one's really coming together. But the conversations that I do have, I tend to find people who voted for Trump and people who voted for Biden essentially want all the same stuff. It's just how do we get there? And I don't have the answer to that, obviously, or else I'd be running. Me and Stephen A. Smith would be running for president and vice president on the ticket, I guess. But like, I hope we figure it out, you know? Or I'll be leaving Australia.
It's not a bad place to
I
live.
love it there.
It's the far end of the world, though. So if you can avoid it, I'd love to have you here. But I'd much rather have a stable America that wasn't backsliding so horribly. So, final question to bring it back to Kwame. For people who aren't familiar with his photography today, what do you think what do you think his legacy has been, and why do you think that they should seek it out?
I think his legacy is, look, this guy had a front row seat to some of Black history's most iconic people. Some of them doing iconic things, like Ali fighting Frazier, like Bob Marley, performing, like things that we can't really touch. I think his legacy was I was your eyes, and I was your eyes for all of this, and seeing his art, seeing the intimacy in which he captured some of these icons and just everyday folk trying to do the best they can. I think his legacy is like that lens into the experience, that lens into, again, I keep saying it, joy and aspiration, but Black joy. Like I think he was able to give us that perspective through his art, and it wasn't always joyous, but it was always honest. And I think that's his legacy. Like, and he didn't, whether you're, James Brown, who we shot, or he shot like a group of people at like some event in DC, like Black, I don't even know what to call it, but it was like, whatever it is, whomever it is, he's showing truth and honesty in the Black experience from all different points of view. And that to me is his legacy.
The photo you just referenced is my favorite from him. It's technically untitled, but it's Human Kindness Day from 1975. They were on their way to see Stevie Wonder perform. If it's the one that I think you're describing.
I think
Pardon
it might
me?
have been in DC, maybe.
Yeah, on the National Mall. And it's like 100 black
Yeah, it's
faces
beautiful.
in a single photo, and there's so much humanity on display, but somehow every face has a
And they're
story.
not all smiling faces either.
No,
And
no.
that perfectly sums up what I was trying to say. Like, he captures the Black experience through that time through many different images of Blacks.
Mm.
And some are happy, some are sad, some are pensive. So he ran the whole gamut. And I hope people discover him more. I hope that Kwame Brathwaite Jr. continues these exhibits and pushing his dad's work out to the masses, because he is an essential part of the Black story experience. Not only as an individual just because of how he lived his life, but again, because of the art that he created, the moments that he captured. And as we're living through a time where they're trying to erase Black history, I think it's really important for all people to lean into the Black experience and to continue to look for and find our truth tellers. And that doesn't have to be audio. It doesn't have to be spoken word to understand the Black experience in its truest form. And I think Kwame's photographs encapsulate that.
Well, thank you for giving us a reason to talk about it today, and for giving my listeners the opportunity to learn more about him and his photographs, his photography, if they didn't know enough yet.
Cool. Thanks for having me. And just as we part, I got Bob Marley, I got Bitterroot, I have my buddy Tommy Oliver, who's a director, writer, producer, photographer, shot this. This would make Brathwaite happy. He shot this at the LA protest for Black Lives Matter. And, I think it's folks like Kwame who inspires folks like Tommy. I think it's important to, always be out in the front lines and always be recording and speaking on the truths that are happening in the world as you see it. So thank you for letting me speak about Mr. Brathwaite.
Thanks, brother.
Are in there.
Thanks for being here. As for you listening, thanks again for your support of 5 a.m. Story Talk. If you have any questions about this bonus episode, make your way to the comments section with them, and I'll do my best to answer you. And if you enjoyed what you just listened to, rating this episode or podcast with 5 stars, a thumbs up, whatever is appropriate to you, it goes a long way to helping a new podcast like this one grow. That's it for now. I'll see you soon for Season 2 of 5 a.m. Story Talk, my friends.